Hey y'all, it's Jazz, your fave mental health enthusiast, and welcome back to Jazz's Corner, which is where we discuss all things related to mental wellness. And in today's video, we're going to be chatting about what are some signs of an unhealthy friendship or romantic relationship. And we're also going to talk about some similarities between romantic relationships and friendships, because I feel like there's a lot of overlap. And we're going to top it off with the art of moving on, which is when you realize that maybe a connection that you have is a bit more toxic than you thought, and how to kind of reconcile with that and move forward, even if that means breaking off the connection. So if you're interested in hearing what I have to say about that topic, continue to watch, and I hope you enjoy the video. Cue the intro. So what is a friend? What is a lover? What binds these two concepts together yet drives them apart? Such philosophical questions. There are some differences between, having a connection with a friend and having a connection with a lover, but I am of the firm belief that there is a lot of overlap in terms of these roles in your connections with others. So for example, both a friend and a lover is essentially a close bond between two individuals that can also double as a source of support. There's also the need for mutual respect and trust. And there is also the idea that both individuals in the connection should be able to grow and develop together as well as apart. With that being said, I would like to highlight 5 signs that maybe your connection with another individual is not as healthy as it could be. And I would like to note that every relationship has its ups and its downs, but the signs that I'm about to discuss represent a persistent pattern of behavior. The first sign that I like to bring up is when there is an unbalanced dynamic somewhere in the relationship, and that can manifest in a number of different ways. It could manifest in terms of what I like to call one-sided pouring, which is when you are pouring into another individual. You're giving them your time, your energy, and your consideration, but you can't quite get that back from them. And it's not to say that because you did this for somebody that they should do this for you. Because to be honest, relationships are not transactional in nature. You can't just swipe a credit card and say, "Hey Jennifer, remember that time you called me crying at 3 o'clock in the morning? Yeah, girl, it's time to pay up. I'm gonna need you to answer that phone. It's my turn to cry at 3 o'clock in the morning. I need my time to shine." No, that is not how it works, unfortunately. What it looks like when you're pouring into each other is that Jennifer might have been asleep when you called at 3 o'clock, and that's okay. But she shows up for you in other ways. Maybe it's sending you a text saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. I hope that things go well or get better." Or maybe she invites you out for a meal or to hang out and just spend time together so that you don't have to think about it. And that allows Jennifer the space to kind of show up for you and be there and give you her time and energy and consideration without being put into this corner where it's strictly transactional. So the biggest indicator of one-sided pouring is if you find that the individual is increasingly physically and emotionally unavailable to your wants and needs in the friendship or relationship. So for example, Jennifer could say, "Forget your problems. I got my own problems. Why do you want to come crying to me?" And yet here you are as a good friend or partner, you're trying to say, "Hey, this is my friend, this is my partner. She calls me crying at 3 a.m. and I'm gonna pick up because I have respect for her." But it seems as if Jennifer does not respect you to the same degree that you respect her. And it's okay if an individual isn't always available during times that we may be in distress, because such is the way of life. If you find that you are consistently riding and going hard for people and riding on E for people who would never even stop to refill your tank or give you the same courtesy, then that is definitely a red flag and signals one-sided pouring. Another behavior that's related to an unbalanced dynamic is possessive behavior. So if your friend or partner gets really jealous when you spend time around other people, then that's definitely a telltale sign that something is a bit off in that connection. You feel me? If you find that your friend or partner is becoming upset with you whenever you attempt to hang out with anyone who isn't them, then that could signify that maybe they have some deep-rooted insecurities that they may be projecting onto you. Another sign of an unhealthy connection is the occurrence of demeaning comments. Now look, we all know that one person who always has jokes, and I'm gonna call them Jokey the Jokester. So Jokey the Jokester might say to me, girl, you need to take that blue lipstick off because you looking like a Smurf up in here. And I mean, I can take a good joke, I can take a good jest, so I might laugh. But if every time I see Jokey the Jokester, they're just poking and poking and poking at something to do with me as a person or my appearance or just anything to do with me, then that is a bit excessive. That is crossing over from being lighthearted fun to being malicious, even if it's unintentional. And at that point, me and Jokey are about to have an issue, to be honest. It doesn't even just have to be excessive criticism though. If Jokey the Jokester is always hitting below the belt and bringing up things that I've explicitly asked them not to bring up, and they're doing it to try and be funny or to try and take a dig at me, then that's definitely hitting below the belt, and I would file that under being a demeaning comment and unhealthy. The third sign that I'd like to bring up is a lack of trust, and I have two examples for this one. So the first one being telling secrets. Let's say I have this friend named George. George is just out there telling me everybody's business. He's telling me the neighbor's business. He's telling me his cousin's business. He's telling me his grandfather's cousin's baby mama's twice removed business. And it really makes me uncomfortable because if George has the capacity to tell me all of these individuals' business, then who is he telling my business to? It definitely would raise a red flag to me. Anyone who feels as though they can be very loose with the things that have been spoken to them in secrecy definitely need a closer eye kept on them. And then the reverse of that is if you catch them actively telling your business. You've said, hey, George, don't tell my business. And then you hear from this, that, and the third that George told them your business. Like, that's not okay, George. That's unhealthy, and you're finna get blocked. Once you call an individual out on this type of behavior, they might say, oh, I'm never gonna do that again. It just kind of slipped my mind or slipped out of my mouth. But at that point, the trust has already been violated. And what I'd like you to keep in mind is that trust is honestly the building blocks and foundation of a friendship or a relationship. So if they have already violated that trust, then even though they said they're not gonna do it again, it's like, can you in good faith really believe that they're not gonna go, if things get heated, that they're not gonna go and tell your business to someone else? Something else that's related to a lack of trust is if you have caught them lying to you. At the point where they have lied to you, it does not really matter if it was a small white lie or if it was a very big lie or even an omission of truth. They have lied to you and they have violated that trust that act as the foundation and building block of that relationship. And once they've lied to you, it kind of triggers this idea of, well, if you lied to me about this, what else have you lied to me about? And what else are you capable of lying to me about? The fourth sign that I would like to talk about is gaslighting, which, to be honest, could be a video all on its own. So let me know in the comments below if you want a video fully on gaslighting. But gaslighting is essentially when an individual is trying to discredit your truth and invalidate the way that you have experienced something. The way that gaslighting usually shows up in any sort of social dynamic is that there's usually a discrepancy between one's words and one's actions. So let's say one of your friends hasn't talked to you in a few weeks and you're starting to feel a little bit iffy about the friendship. You're not really sure what's going on with the friendship. So you reach out to them in good faith, like, hey, what's going on? And then they respond and they're like, what do you mean what's going on? And you're like, well, you haven't talked to me in like 3 weeks. And they're like, what? No, I've been talking to you. And you're like, no, like, honey, look, here's the receipts. Like, you haven't spoken to me. And they're like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I have definitely tried to talk to you. Whether you didn't get my message, like, that is on you. That is definitely gaslighting. Like, they know good and well that for 3 weeks they were not trying to talk to you like that. And when you called them out on it, they challenged your perspective and your experience, and they were essentially like, yeah, no, that didn't happen. That the way you're saying that happened, that's not what happened. I was not ignoring you. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Prime example of gaslighting. There's also a slightly related example that I have that also falls under gaslighting, and this is when the individual is giving you the silent treatment. And during the silent treatment, they know that they're not talking to you. They fully would acknowledge that they were talking to you if they were talking to you, but they're not. So after a lot of trial and error, you eventually just figure out that, oh, they're not talking to me for whatever reason. And during the silent treatment, it's usually during times of conflict. It's a power move, and it really goes back to the unbalanced dynamic that I spoke about earlier, but it's a power move, and it's when the individual is shutting down and refusing to speak to you versus engaging in some sort of conflict resolution for you for like whatever might be going on with the connection. The last sign that I would like to share with you all is the inability to grow together, because the ability to grow together is what helps a friendship continue to be dynamic. If you're growing together throughout the years, then you're much more likely to have a long-lasting friendship. So for example, let's say you met when you were 7. You're not going to be the same when you're 17, and you're not going to be the same when you're 27. Not even going to be the same when you're like 30. So if you never change, if the dynamic of your relationship never changes from the time that you were 7 years old to now you're 30, then it's very stagnant, and there's likely a lot of problematic behavioral patterns that have never been addressed in the dynamic. Speaking for friendships, if you are in a romantic relationship with somebody, year 1 looks a lot different from year 15. And one thing that I've learned from those who are in long-lasting relationships is that you really have to grow and adapt, and along the way your relationship also has to grow and adapt if you're going to continue to make it in the future. And the more natural path that I mentioned is when you are essentially just growing distant from one another. And as unfortunate as that is, sometimes that does happen, where friends who have been friends for a very long time are just one day not friends anymore. But usually what happens is all of the other signs that I have mentioned in this video, they appeared in that dynamic in some shape, form, or fashion. I won't say that the friendship was 100% unhealthy, it was toxic. I won't say that because I cannot be the judge of that. But I will say that what keeps a relationship going is mutual trust, respect, communication, love, compassion, empathy, and a lot of the signs that I've spoken about, that's not in any of those signs. There is no love and trust when you're being lied to. There is no compassion and empathy when you are being gaslit. And so ultimately, if there are these kind of warning signs, if they go unmediated, then ultimately the individuals tend to grow apart from one another. So with that being said, that brings me to the art of moving on, which is when you have identified that you were in a potentially unhealthy connection and you are not with it. You're like, okay, I gotta get out of here. Like, there's better waiting for me out there. I can't do it anymore. So one of the key aspects to moving on is remembering that it takes two to sustain a connection. You cannot want to save something more than the other person does. You could have so much love for someone, like so much love, but if they don't want to put in the time or the energy to help repair a potentially unhealthy situation, then at some point we've got to cut our losses, because both of you have to be willing to put in that time and that energy. Also, while you're in the process of moving on, remember to be kind to yourself as you go through this journey. It is not an easy one, especially if you have been friends or in a relationship with this individual for a very long time. Make sure to take some time to really sort through your feelings regarding it all. Maybe journal, phone a friend, just find a way to kind of acknowledge what you were feeling, because honestly, the death of a connection is akin to grieving. Finally, know that this experience does not determine your self-worth. You are worthy of healthy connections. You heard it here on this channel. You are worthy of healthy connections. Sometimes we've got to do the hard thing and cut all the weeds in order to see what is blooming underneath. And that is the art of moving on. So that brings us to the end of another video, and I would like to thank you for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed and learned something new here in Jazz's Corner. I'd love to hear in the comments below, what was a time where you identified that maybe you had an unhealthy friendship or relationship, and were you able to course correct it, or did you ultimately have to terminate the connection? So I'd love to hear about that in the comments below. As always, I will be here reading the comments, and if you'd like to like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it, as well as follow me on Instagram for Instagram mental wellness shenanigans. I would appreciate that as well, and I will see you in the next video. Jazz out, and remember to drink some water and give yourself a hug.